And welcome to the middle of the week here on the Morning Pitt, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Like this video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. I'm just going to say those things right off the bat. You know I'm going to say them anyway. You know I'm going to ask you to do it. Hit the subscribe button and make sure you like this video as well. Remember, if you hit subscribe, you can turn on notifications so you get an alert sent to your phone every time we go live or every time we post a new video. And that first part, the going live part, will come in handy tonight. We're going to have our live Panther Lair show here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. It'll start after the basketball game ends. Pitt is going to face Michigan in the Legends Classic tonight. That's a 6 o'clock tip-off. We should have no problem making our usual start time of 8:30. But just in case that game runs long or anything like that, we might start a little bit later. We're not going to start before the game is over. So in that case, if the game goes long, you might be like, wait, when are you going to start? When's the post-game show going to start? Or when's the Panther-Lair show going to start? Same thing on Saturday. Pitt has a noon game against Duke. I don't know what time we're going to start. Might be a little bit later. Maybe we'll do like a 9 or 10 o'clock show at night on Saturday. I'm not sure yet. But if you want to make sure you don't miss it, subscribe to the YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Turn on notifications and you'll get an alert sent to your phone. You'll never miss any of our Pitt video content, new videos we post, or anytime we go live for one of our live Panther-Lair shows. Like I say, like tonight, probably around 8:30 after the game on Saturday at some point. Not sure the time just yet. So we got definitely do that. Like the video, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Couple of things to talk about today as we get going here. Like I said, Pitt's going to play a basketball game tonight in the Legends Classic. They're going to take on Michigan, and we'll talk about that game in a little bit. We want to start off with kind of a basic question. It's something I've been thinking about a lot. I asked Tim Salem about it yesterday, the Pitt tight ends coach, and just sort of, I think I've said it a couple times, written it on Panther-Lair.com. I think I said it on either yesterday's Morning Pitt or the day before. And it's kind of a basic question. I mean, you already see it because you see the headline of this video. You see the name of the video. Is Pitt's offense getting better? and it's a question I keep like wrestling with. And I mean, I know we could go down a long rabbit hole of competition and what they did against this team, what they did against that team. I mean, I think, if we're looking at the last few games, Carolina's defense, not really very good. Or at least they're very yielding in giving up yards, rushing, passing yards, touchdowns, all that stuff. But Virginia and Syracuse, relatively solid defenses, pretty good statistical production up till the time they played Pitt. And let's not kid ourselves. Pitt scored 40 offensive points in the last 2 games. So it's not like they've been lighting the world on fire. But I can't shake the feeling, and maybe I'm just focusing on positives. Maybe I'm only looking at the things that went well, and maybe we've become so desensitized to the poor play that we don't notice it as much. But I can't shake the feeling that they are playing better in the last few weeks, and that they are, I'm not going to say turning a corner, because I don't think things happen that suddenly, that all of a sudden you're bad, and then boom, you're good. It just doesn't happen that way. That's not realistic. It's more of a gradual process. It's a few steps forward and a couple steps back. And you just try to have more steps forward than steps back. And just to continue sort of making a little progress and moving forward in the development and the cohesion and ultimately in the effectiveness of the offense. And, there is also... And I kind of came across this as I was sort of compiling some numbers and things like that from the last few games, particularly compared to the first 7. I mean, there's definitely an element of damning with faint praise. There's an element of, well, they're not as bad as they were at that. They're not committing 4 turnovers in a game anymore. They're only committing 2. So you do kind of draw a line at, we can say they're getting better, but we don't have to necessarily say they're good. And I think that's probably where we're at with this Pitt offense right now, that I do think they've improved over the last 3 games. Not necessarily to the point where I'd say they are good, but maybe if they continue on the trajectory they're on and they have another 8 games to play, they can get to the point of being good if they keep sort of moving at the pace they are. Look, I think this offense bottomed out in the Georgia Tech game. I think that was the absolute low point. The games before that, you have caveats and disclaimers about the two games that came before the Georgia Tech game. Obviously, the West Virginia and Tennessee games are almost on a different planet with almost a different team and a different schedule and a different year. Like there's so very little that I think we can look back at those games and draw connections and lines through, to the team that's playing now, to the team that played at Virginia, the team that's going to play against Duke on Saturday. There's very little we can draw a connection with in terms of who they are, what they do, what they attempt to do, and how they attempt to do it. It just feels like a different world. And I mean, to some extent, even those games felt like different worlds within themselves. I mean, the first half of West Virginia versus the second half of West Virginia. The second half of the West Virginia game had a lot more in common with the first half of the Tennessee game than he did with the first half of the West Virginia game itself. And then, by the time you get to the second half of Tennessee, you've lost Keaton Slovis. You're playing with Nick Patty. Nick Patty gets hurt. You're playing with a limited Nick Patty. And then you get to Western Michigan. You have a different quarterback altogether. Rhode Island, you come back with Slovis back on the field. And, I mean, I've wasted enough oxygen and brain cells thinking about that game and how little sense it made, how mind-boggling it was that they took the approach they took. And I'll still maintain, and I don't know if anybody in the South Side would admit to this or agree to this, and maybe they would say, not only are we disagreeing, you're an idiot for even considering it, but I would still maintain that they would have given themselves a better chance of success in the Georgia Tech game on October 1st if they had actually tried to work on the passing game against Rhode Island. Keaton Slovis talked to the media yesterday and said something to a certain extent when they went into the Rhode Island game, since it was his first game back, they did try to protect him a little bit more as far as the kinds of protections and things they ran. And you remember, I mean, it was screen after screen after screen after screen in that game. It was hand the ball off and throw a screen, hand the ball off and throw a screen. It was things to get the ball out of his hands quickly and ideally not put him in jeopardy or put him in danger, which is good. It was a good idea. But I don't think it really helped you for the rest of the season. I don't think it put you in any better position to enter the month of October, and more importantly, enter the ACC games when that was your, kind of opportunity to ease him back in and your opportunity to get him comfortable on the field again. And I think that Georgia Tech game was a bottoming out moment. I think we'll look back at that game, obviously, and talk about how bad it was. How it was the worst loss of the season and really, just one of the bigger disappointments of the Pat Narduzzi era in losing that game against Georgia Tech the week after the week they fire their head coach. And for them to come up here, you're ranked, you have a lot riding on it, you have a lot of momentum, and you just blow it with a 26-21 loss to that team. It was really disappointing, and it was really the first game that the offense truly cost Pitt a victory. And like I say, I think the offense bottomed out that day. And it's interesting because when you look at that game, they attempted 45 passes against Georgia Tech. Season high for pass attempts in a single game. 45 in the Georgia Tech game. And I don't necessarily go so far as to draw a connection between, you see what happened when they tried to throw it the most. They only scored 3 touchdowns, and 2 of those were scored kind of in garbage-ish time in the fourth quarter. I'm not going to draw a connection quite that far because a lot of the pass attempts did come in the fourth quarter. 19 passes were thrown in the fourth quarter, plus a sack. So really they called 20 passing plays in the fourth quarter. As they were trying to catch up, they were playing from behind. But even then, with 45 passes in the game, they still threw 26 passes through the first 3 quarters, which is more than they threw against West Virginia. Obviously, more than they threw against Western Michigan. And I'm talking about the entire game here. You're talking about 3 quarters. The first 3 quarters against Georgia Tech, 26 pass attempts. Comparing that to the full game totals of some of these other games, that's more than they threw the entire game against West Virginia. It's obviously more than they threw the entire game against Western Michigan. It's 1 fewer than they threw the entire game against Rhode Island. And it's more than they've thrown in each of the last 2 games. The Virginia Tech game, they attempted 28 passes. The Louisville game, they attempted 29 passes. And here again, I'm talking about 26 pass attempts just in the first 3 quarters. Is it possible that against Georgia Tech, they threw it too much? This is all, hindsight, and you forget the exact moment, but it not coincidentally coincided with the next to fewest rushing amounts, or rushing totals, or rushing attempts, I should say, of the season. They recorded 31 official rushing attempts in that game. The only game with fewer than that was the North Carolina game when they ran it 30 times. So, is there a correlation between the worst offensive game of the season and the game where they threw it the most and ran it the least? Maybe. But we could probably debate that a little bit. But let's just set that as the bottoming out of the offense, of the worst game of the season. Now, obviously, the next week against Virginia Tech, they set a new Pitt single game rushing record. Izzy Abanikanda runs for 320 yards, breaking Tony Dorsett's single game record. They still threw the ball 28 times in that game. Not very well. 15 of 28 for 170 and a touchdown. But I guess you would say that was an improvement over the Georgia Tech game just because they were able to run so well. But then they have the bye week and they come back and they go to Louisville, and that game, 4 turnovers in that game is really the story of the game, particularly 3 turnovers inside the 30 in the first half. I mean, we talk about what if scenarios. I mean, just don't turn the ball over in those situations, and you're going to get points and probably end up winning that game. You're already in range for field goals, and you've got a legitimate shot at touchdowns. You just make 3 really bad errors, 3 really bad mistakes. So that was not a good game for the offense by any stretch. I mean, they kind of moved the ball well when they weren't turning it over, but because of the turnovers, they killed a bunch of drives. And so you have this bottoming out against Georgia Tech. You have this dominant running performance against Virginia Tech, but no real passing game to speak of. And then you have this turnover-prone mess at Louisville where, they really couldn't, they kept shooting themselves in the foot. Could have had 3 touchdowns, in the first half, just on those drives where they turned the ball over. So you have that, and you head into the last 3 games: North Carolina, Syracuse, Virginia. And the North Carolina game obviously ends up as a loss. I mean, pretty convincing loss, and a lot of that has to do with North Carolina. A lot of that has to do with Drake May. But Pitt's offense, I think, it's interesting to me from that game because what you had was the first sort of glimmer of this passing game being able to do something. And the something they did in that game was play action passes. And I forget exactly how many it was, maybe like 5 play action deep shots or something like that. And that they put up 181 yards on those 5 plays. And they only finished with 236 passing yards. So they didn't really do so well outside of those play action passes. But for the first time, you watched the passing attack and said, "What? They actually have something they're doing well here." I don't think there was really too many points where consistently over the course of a quarter or a half or a game where you would say, man, the passing attack is really kind of doing this thing well. Every now and then they do something well for a few plays or something, but not as consistently well as they executed those play action post passes, mostly to Jared Wayne, in that North Carolina game. Now it's, this is probably one of those situations where things were so bad that we take whatever little bits of success we can find and sort of build them up into be more than they were. But I do think when you had a passing attack that couldn't really find any groove, couldn't find any kind of routine or effectiveness or even just a comfort level, find something they were good at. When they couldn't even do that basically for the first, how many games led up to the Carolina game? 7 games? When they couldn't do that for the first 7 games, to come out and be able to have some success, not to mention success running play action deep shots, which is something we all said all year. If you're going to run the ball as well as you are, if you're going to run the ball as much as you are, at least manufacture some play action shots out of it if you're going to run that much. And they finally did. And so while it ultimately, still ended up, Keaton Slovis was 14 of 31 for 236. Just being able to do something pretty well consistently, I thought was a step in the right direction. I think it's the Syracuse game. And Slovis goes 16 to 23 for 176, no touchdowns, and a pick. It's a pretty pedestrian stat line, maybe even a bad one. You're not going to really get too excited about a guy who throws for 176 yards and no touchdowns and 1 interception. And the interception was a pretty bad one. And it was a pass where he claimed he was trying to throw it away, or Pat Narduzzi said he claimed he was trying to throw it away, and obviously did not execute that well. But I still kind of came away from that game feeling like Kedon Slovis was pretty sharp. And again, the bar was set so low for this passing game and for Slovis's performance that it doesn't take much to look like an improvement, but I think it did look like an improvement. He completed passes to 6 different players after completing passes to only 3 in the North Carolina game. And when he was clean in the pocket, when the O-line gave him time, he was 14 of 15 for 153 yards, according to Pro Football Focus, which is that's a great stat line. 14 of 15, averaging 10 yards per attempt. It's pretty good. Now, I thought this was an interesting stat too. Pro Football Focus tracks contested catches and contested catch targets, and there were none in that game. No contested catch targets. And I think that's an interesting stat because, to some extent with this passing game and with Kedon Slovis, I think they just needed to sort of start over, just kind of bring it down to fundamentals, take what's there, complete the passes. When you've got a clean pocket, find the open receiver and just get the ball to them. It doesn't have to be a deep shot that you into triple coverage in the end zone. Just find the guys that are open and just complete passes. You can get it to them and get into a little bit of a rhythm. And this is what he did. With a clean pocket, he completed 14 of 15, no contested catches, just getting the ball out. Getting the ball to guys. 10 yards per attempt. Love it. 10 yards, a little more than 10 yards per completion. That's a good step for Kedon Slovis given how he's played this season. And you go forward to this Virginia game. Final stat line, 14 of 24, 208 yards, 1 touchdown. Slovis's first touchdown pass since the Georgia Tech game. His first touchdown pass to a receiver who's currently on the roster. With the pass to Bub Means. And I thought it was maybe Slovis's best game. I thought he threw well. He found good targets. He found good players to throw to. I think he saw the routes well and had a few good leading passes. One that wasn't caught, and one that was. He missed a few throws. I don't think there's any question. He probably could have had 2 more touchdown passes on top of the one that he made to Bub Means. And that's kind of why I say that I feel like with this offense and with a lot of things, it'll be a few steps forward, but not all the way forward, and there might be a step back or 2. But on the whole, I thought the Virginia game was a step forward for Slovis and for the passing game and for the offense as a whole. No turnovers. Huge stat there. No turnovers, which is, I don't remember the last time they had no turnovers in a game, actually. Maybe the Rhode Island game? Forget if they fumbled. Let me see. I don't think they had a fumble in the Rhode Island game. They had no interceptions in the Rhode Island game. Nope, they didn't lose any fumbles in the Rhode Island game. So, let me see. That might have been the only other game this season when they did not turn the ball over, the Rhode Island game. And then this game against Virginia here on Saturday. So that's a huge step in the right direction. Running game ends up with 189 yards on 48 carries. That's obviously a lot of attempts. And, probably if you're going to run the ball 48 times, you'd like to get more than 189 carries. But I really sort of felt like, the one thing that was missing from the running game at Virginia on Saturday was that long run, that long breakaway run from Izzy Abanikanda. And I felt like he was close. It was, and if he just has one of them, one like 35, 45-yard run, maybe for a touchdown, maybe just a long run downfield. I mean, now you're looking at a 240, 250-yard day on 48 carries, and you're saying, okay, that was a huge rushing performance, a dominant rushing performance, and a passing game that was pretty sharp. No sacks allowed, no turnovers created, or no turnovers given up, and overall a pretty good offensive performance, and one that seemed to sort of build on what they had done the previous 2 weeks. Play action deep shots of North Carolina and the sort of clean efficiency of the Syracuse game sort of came together, and I think you got a little bit of both in the performance at Virginia. And again, I mean, if you want to say we're grasping at straws here, we're finding any positive, anything they did that was not bad and turning it into a positive. I mean, maybe to some extent, yes. But this offense has been that bad and has cost them wins that if they go into games like Syracuse and Virginia, where the defense is just dominating, the offense really just needs to do a few key things. And I think they did it. And I think they did it well. So as they head into these final two games, they hosting Duke this weekend and going to Miami next week, it's just a matter of continuing that stuff. The run is still going to be the foundation of the offense. They're going to hand it off. They might throw it on first down the first play of the game, and they should. But they're still going to build a lot of the offense off of the run game. But I think you'll see the passing game take another bit of a step. I don't know how big of a step it's going to be. And maybe it won't be as big as we would like it to be. But they're going to continue to take more steps. I think they are kind of rounding into form here in the last 3 games leading into this, and they have a chance to finish basically the final half of the season, or at least the final 5 games of the regular season, playing better. Will it constitute by the end of the year, will they be what we would consider a good offense? I would say probably not. I think there's only so much they can achieve and so much improvement they can make at this point in the season. But the fact that they do seem to be getting better, I think that's a positive. And it's credit to Keaton Slovis and those guys for continuing to improve. All right, hoop side, Pitt, Michigan tonight, the Legends Classic. It's 6:00 tip-off. You can watch it. What's it on TV? ESPNU. You can also listen on 93.7 The Fan if you're so inclined to do it that way. This is a tough matchup. I mean, it's just a tough matchup. Hunter Dickinson is averaging like 27 and 10 for Michigan, the big center. I mean, that's a tough matchup for anybody, and it's a tough matchup certainly for a team that, their best player is their center, and he hasn't played, all season through the first 2 games and really only returned to practice this week after being out since the end of September. So missing more than a month before returning to practice with a knee injury. Of course, John Hughley is who we're talking about. Jeff Capel said on Monday that there was it looks like Hughley will play against Michigan. We'll see if it comes to fruition tonight. If Hughley actually is on the court, we'll see what it looks like, and we'll see how many minutes he can actually play and where his conditioning level is, because that rehabbing a knee is one thing. Getting your conditioning back after being out that long is another thing altogether. And I'm sure they've done everything they can to try to maintain Hughley's conditioning, but there's only so much you can do when you have a big brace on your knee and you can't bend your knee. So that's going to be tough. I think Hughley at 100% would make this game more interesting, but even then it's going to be a difficult matchup. I mean, we saw Pitt really had no inside presence on either end of the court against West Virginia, and I think they're going to have an even tougher matchup against Michigan tonight. I don't know what's going to happen. It's still early in the season, and obviously I was way off when I predicted that Pitt would beat West Virginia, but I have a hard time picking the Panthers to win this game tonight. I think they'll shoot better than they did in the West Virginia game. I think they are a better shooting team than that, but it's just going to be challenging to play against this Michigan team. It's going to be challenging to play against Hunter Dickinson. It's just going to be a really tough one. Michigan's ranked number 20 nationally. They scored 88 against Eastern Michigan in their last game. It was an 88-83 game. No clear advantage that Eastern Michigan seemed to have. They didn't shoot that well from 3. They shot about as well from 2 as Michigan did. Didn't really, Michigan didn't commit a ton of turnovers. They out-rebounded Eastern Michigan, but Eastern Michigan was able to keep it close. Pitt, I think until John Hughley gets back and at full strength at 100%, and maybe even beyond, is going to have to rely on those 3-point shots. And if the shots aren't falling, it's going to be a long night for them. And so they have to go out, start firing away, hope they can get good looks, and then convert when they do. That's going to be a challenge. And then obviously staying out of foul trouble. That was such a big problem last Friday night in the West Virginia game, particularly first half when you have Nelly Cummings and Jamarius Burton and Fede Federico and Blake Hinson all sitting on the bench with 2 fouls at by midpoint, or I guess 3/4 of the way through the first half. When you're in that situation, that's a really, really difficult situation. Your depth is being tested far more than you ever like it to be. And obviously you saw what the outcome was. So stay out of foul trouble, try to avoid turnovers, and then Get your shot going. I mean, that's what it's going to come down to tonight. You're not going to win the advantage in the paint. I think you're going to have a hard time scoring or defending in that area. And so you're going to have to win from outside, which is going to be the case until John Hughley's 100%. And then even once he is 100%, you're going to still have to make those shots from outside to draw the attention away from Hughley. If Hughley can play tonight, give some minutes, maybe he can make an impact on this thing. Can he make enough of an impact to get a victory? I have a hard time calling that one. I really do. But we'll see what happens. And like I say, we'll be live after the game tonight for the Panther-Lair show right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, and like this video. We appreciate you watching it. Of course, as always, you made it to the midpoint of the week. So 2 days down, and after this, 2 days to go. So you're almost there. You get some Pitt basketball tonight and some more Pitt basketball tomorrow night. And leading into Saturday when Pitt will host Duke in the regular season finale at Acrisure Stadium. So thanks again for tuning in and checking out this video today. We appreciate it. We'll see you tonight, of course, on the Panther-Lair show right here on youtube.com and /Panther-Lair.com. And then we'll be back tomorrow morning with another Morning Pitt right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.